I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, our top stories. Israel has warned that it will continue to strike against the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah after saying it killed a militant commander in an airstrike on Beirut. Meanwhile, Hezbollah has also maintained its attacks, firing more rockets and drones into northern Israel from across the border. And news just in, confirmation that the UK is sending around 700 troops to Cyprus in case of an emergency evacuation is necessary from Lebanon as fighting between Israel and Hezbollah continues to escalate. Well, hello there, watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and the PR consultant Alex Dean. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
So as ever, the front pages. Let's start with the Daily Mail leading on the situation in the Middle East, reporting that Marines are ready for mass evacuation of Britons from Lebanon amid the growing conflict. In his first speech to the Labour conference since becoming Prime Minister, The Telegraph reports that Sir Keir Starmer declared the state will take back control in people's lives, a slogan popularised during Brexit. The Guardian quotes the Prime Minister after his speech to the Labour Party. Their headline, "Keep the faith and Britain will prosper," urges Starmer. The Mirror also reports on Starmer's promise to fix the economy. Tough love is the headline they've gone with. The Metro leading with the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper's pledge to halve knife crime in Britain within a decade and to eradicate the use of so-called zombie knives. The Eye reporting the EU is willing to back down on new migration demands for all under 30s. The Financial Times reports of the Chinese government's launch of a stimulus package designed to boost the world's second largest economy. Daily Express has a story about the Princess of Wales. They report she has returned to work after her cancer as she planned for her Christmas Carol concert. And the Daily Star has a story on the Loch Ness Funster. What does that mean? Scan that QR code that you can see on screen. Check out the front pages for yourself. Read more about that Loch Ness Funster. Obviously, you can then listen to Jenny Kleeman and Alex Dean while you're doing so. We're going to move up and talk about Lebanon straight away. Confirmation we've had that the UK is sending around 700 troops to Cyprus in case an emergency evacuation is required. One wonders why they're not urging Britons to leave Lebanon already.
Well, I think that was the FCO advice for some time. When I saw the front of the Mail, I thought that comparison with Dunkirk was a bit of use of hyperbole out of character for the Mail, but actually it's not. It would seem that our troops have been preparing for Operation Meteoric, for that is the name of this operation, in which they may well have to literally land on the beaches in Lebanon to seek to extract British nationals. And what the papers agree on is that whilst a month ago there were some 15,000 plus British nationals in Lebanon, there are now at least still over 10,000 Brits in Lebanon.
Yeah, just dropped actually a message from Sir Keir Starmer, embargoed to now. The most important message from me this evening is to British nationals in Lebanon to leave immediately, and I just want to reinforce that. Yes, we are ramping up the contingency plans. I think that you would expect that in light of the escalation. The statement continues, but it is important that we be really, really clear. Now is the time to leave. More broadly, I'm worried about the situation, and I think we need to be clear. We need de-escalation. We need a ceasefire. We need to pull back from the brink. I think that will be amongst the first topics we discuss in New York. He, of course, heading to the UN General Assembly, where a lot of the focus will be on the situation here. Marines ready for mass evacuation of Lebanon Brits. Daily Telegraph as well. Army ready to evacuate 10,000 Britons as the Middle East crisis worsens. Jenny?
Well, there has been this continuing brinkmanship over the past week, ever since these pages exploded, which was only a week ago. Yeah. But neither side is going to back down. You have Hezbollah, a prescribed terrorist organisation, and you have Israel, who are determined to move Israeli citizens back to the north. And both sides are using displacement as a weapon of war here. You have within Lebanon a sort of lockjam of people trying to escape regions where they could be targeted. But Beirut has been targeted. People have been targeted within Beirut. Within Israel, you have such an extent of shelling. And in fact, Hezbollah doesn't need to launch many attacks in a day to prevent people from moving back to their homes. They only need to launch a few rockets for it to be not safe for everyone to go back home. And Netanyahu, having said now that this is a stated war aim, it's not just getting the hostages home and obliterating Hamas, it's also allowing the Israelis who live in the north to return home. This is just getting worse and worse. And you have Iran pulling the strings of Hezbollah. You have the entire country of Lebanon being used as a kind of playground for these two sides to clash. It just feels more and more febrile by the minute.
Well, of course, it was a playground just for Hezbollah for some time, which has operated more or less openly in Lebanon for years. Yes, with Iran's support, but also for whatever passes for state authority in Lebanon not restricting it either. And our government, like other governments, has prescribed Hezbollah as a terrorist organisation. There is one other thing that's worth pointing out. In a real war, in a full-blown war, the first things you do are capture the vital instruments of a functioning society. Beirut Airport tonight is still open. One of the things that British nationals are being urged to do is take the commercial flights, which are still flying, right? So, I mean, many of us would have decided to have done that already, but we can understand why people with family ties, it's their homes, why they haven't done so far. You can get, or hopefully, if there is a seat left, there are flights leaving Beirut Airport. It's still functioning. And, in a war, in an actual war, Israel would have seized that airport and seized a port and so forth. They're not at war with Lebanon. They're seeking, and I appreciate it's semi-permeable definition, they're seeking to stamp out an organisation we too have described as a terrorist one.
Yes, and, the mood music from the MOD, the Royal Air Force, has planes and transport helicopters on standby to provide support if necessary, presuming, therefore, that, they can land, which is what you're suggesting. And clearly the Israelis are saying, we have no beef with the Lebanese. It is Hezbollah, the proxy of Iran that you mentioned, that is in our sights, and we will persist in pursuing them. And they want this resolution, which was drafted after the 2006 Lebanese war, 1701, to actually be enacted. And they want a buffer zone around this southern part of Lebanon and northern Israel.
Yeah, that's right.
Would that be a reasonable conclusion for Israel's aim, do you think? Will this be the focus at the United Nations?
Given the level of attacks that have been mounted on northern Israel, I would think that's reasonable, but I think it stands next to no chance of passing the United Nations General Assembly in the current environment in which Israel is seen as increasingly isolated. Furthermore, whatever one thinks of people using pages and explosive devices, given that network was identified as one being used by a terrorist organisation, it was very targeted. Shelling is different. Shelling people with, again, it's Lebanon's statistics or Hezbollah statistics, more than 500 casualties in one go. People, that's going to colour perspectives and change minds in a way that the pager attacks might not have done. I think it's going to be much harder for Israel to secure its desires in the UN now.
Well, in the meantime, Reuters has been reporting this evening that Iran has brokered ongoing secret talks between Russia and Yemen's Houthi rebels, who've also been firing and landing on ships in the Red Sea, firing towards Israel as well, with the suggestion that Russia could send missiles to the Houthis. So you start to see the conflagration here. This, what have they called it? The axis of... What was it? The axis of retribution or whatever it is. That this is broadening out if Russia's now included in it. Axis of resistance, I mean, that's the one, yes. It's broadening out if Russia now starts to supply missiles.
That would be, of course, a nightmare. But there are, many actors who were poised to leap on Israel. Yeah. And the problem is, I would say, that the Israeli government has acted in such a way that it has squandered a lot of the goodwill of the wider community, international community. And when you say things like, that the pager attack was very targeted, it was also completely indiscriminate because you don't know who the person was standing next to when they had the pager. We know that children were killed this way. This is so dangerously close to the brink. Every single move takes us closer and closer. There are so many people, so many countries flexing their muscles. And it will take very little to tip this over the edge.
Well, I agree, of course, about the loss of goodwill, and I think very few people would argue, even Zionists like myself, would argue that Israel has mounted a good comms campaign, but I don't think that's foremost in their minds. I would just point out the axis of resistance: Russia, Iran, Israel surrounded by enemies. The idea it's resistance against tiny, plucky Israel, the only democracy and functioning democracy in the region, is just a farce for me. But quite good branding.
Resistance was against their actions in Gaza, obviously, and they all say if there's a ceasefire in Gaza, you know, the retreat happens, as it were.
Yeah, but the idea that Russia cares at all about people in Gaza is just hilarious. They just want to be on the opposite side.
It's very convenient for Russia and co, because when the Houthis act as they do, they interfere with international shipping on the pretext of attacking Israel, but interfering with everyone's shipping.
Yeah. A quick look at the world section of the Times on this one. To hell with all of them. Lebanese flee Israeli bombs. You know, the sort of first person reporting there, also talking in this double-page spread, actually, of creaky Biden feels the hand of history at his UN farewell.
Yes.
One of the many leaders speaking at the UN General Assembly, including Keir Starmer later on this week. He will be there, obviously, on Wednesday as well. Just very quickly.
I mean, just Biden, you know, saying that he has faith that there will be a diplomatic solution. He's been saying this ever since October the 7th, and I think he would have wanted to have gone out of the UN on a much more victorious note, with something much more positive than just words of reassurance.
Yeah. Should we do Labour? That's what we were going to kick off with until the breaking news about the sort of evacuation plans began to be in place. Tough love is how the Daily Mirror has described the speech today.
Keir Starmer promising to have government intervention and control in almost every aspect of our lives. And if you think that more government is a good thing, then you will like this speech. And if you think that more government is... If you don't have absolute and innate faith in government intervention in all things, then you won't. But in the course of his hour-long speech, which, if you ask me, is far too long in the modern age, he promised more government intervention in, and I had to list this, the NHS, energy, justice, education, the office, as in our office, we work in one, and the economy. And I'm sure he'll be handing over to other ministers to have more intervention in other things in our lives as well. So, lovely, lovely government.
You're reading from the front of the Telegraph.
Well, let's
just going to have that.
You don't think it's not true?
No, I think it's true. But I think he talked about other things as well.
The state will take back control. It kind of says it all.
That wasn't the only take that you could take from this. I mean, look, Keir Starmer is not a magnetic speaker. He's chosen this phrase, change, which was Barack Obama's big phrase. You don't want to be compared to Barack Obama when you're an orator like this. But, you know, the nation didn't necessarily vote for him for his great charisma. They voted for him because he promised something different. And my concern in all of this, in hearing his speech, is because we don't have the budget yet, he still is tinkering around the edges. He has got power. We still don't really know what he's going to do with it. He still lacks a kind of narrative, a big story about what he's about. And maybe that's to do with the fact that they haven't had a budget yet. But at the moment, the only big story that Labour can pin itself to is the fact that they've cut the winter fuel allowance, which is a story of doom and gloom that they can't seem to escape. I
agree. It feels like waiting for the other shoe to drop until the budget lands. That's a very nice dress that his wife was wearing. I wonder who paid for it. The reason that people are interested in the take-back control line that he's using, the old vote leave line, is that, of course, in July he said the state would tread more lightly on our lives. Right, so he's obviously junked that already. We're on version 2 of Starmer. And are we really going to pretend he didn't say sausages instead of hostages about this speech? Because I think that's what most people are going to remember from an hour-long speech, is a remarkable blooper that is being repeated everywhere in the opinion pieces, and just shows that no matter how dull you try to be, you know, the inner demon will out from time to time. You think the speech sizzled? You think it was a banger?
Oh, very good. No, I think the fact that that's not on the front pages is a victory for him. The fact that people have looked beyond that.
Victory for serious journalism.
Victory for...
You know, he's already sat there not remembering a word. You know,
I found that...
live delivery is a difficult thing.
Well, you know, he took a real grilling.
The fact that
Is it time to end?
He's appealing to Brexit voters and trying to look tough on immigration and reclaiming patriotism away from the people who are rioting, the claim of that, and also talking about welfare reforms, you know, trying to talk tough to the left of his party again and again. You know, he is talking to a broader church now, even though the way he's talking is quite boring.
Solid. Well, it wasn't the worst.
No, OK.
Oh, God.
Just very
Alex.
quickly then, The Guardian on this, keep the faith and Britain will prosper, the sense of asking, the voters for patience.
Yes.
And, of course, the point you were making, the FT has it, speaking by the Union flag, because it was said after Corbyn that actually there wasn't enough nationalism in the Labour Party, so he's remembering that.
Yes, but also reclaiming patriotism, which I'm really happy about, that you can be proud of being British without being a rice.
I'm in favour of that too. The Guardian notes he used the word Britain 21 times in the course of his speech. It's unclear whether the Guardian approves of that or not, but they state it as a fact.
Lots more still to come, including also today from there, the government pledging to halve knife crime within a decade. Is that a realistic target? Back in a moment.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
An enormous explosion that's just come down. I think it was a monster just landed in between us.
Hundreds and hundreds of people hoping to get north, ultimately to get to the United States.
It's a border where they're not welcome, yet they keep coming.
We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people, taking them out and putting them into trucks and taking them away.
They make about 50 kilos of fentanyl a week. It's incredibly dangerous and toxic stuff.
There's been an upsurge in deaths. The fighting between the gangs is getting more and more vicious.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades, which is over there. This is much more like a normal town. It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change. We're being crushed.
Free from wherever you get your news.
We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. This is real, hardcore emergency medicine.
The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world.
Sky News, the full story first.
Well, hundreds of thousands of people have been using the beast for years to traverse Mexico, but it is really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me once again, Jenny Kleeman and Alex Dean. Welcome back to both of you. You know, on a day we hear more knife crime. Knife crime was one of the parts of the agenda. With this targeting of zombie knives, for example, you know, wanting to rid effectively a scourge of British streets. Is it sustainable, do you think, as a policy idea?
Well, I think targeting the knives, of course, is a good idea, but the issue isn't the knives. I mean, you've got the front of the Metro here, which says, you know, it talks about today being the day the latest victim of a so-called zombie blade was named. And I would say, yes, they're a victim of a zombie blade, but they're a victim of a person who's chosen to stab them. And the issue isn't necessarily what kind of knife is being used. And, you know, we can't ban all knives. The issue is young people who are doing this. And that is a much more difficult thing to tackle than simply these blades. But, of course, people shouldn't be using these blades. When you see what they look like, it's just completely ridiculous.
And there's no legitimate use for them on British streets, and carrying them alone should carry a hefty penalty. But there is, I think, some hope here, and it should be bipartisan hope. We've seen police forces trial amnesty bins, and the introduction of these laws are put in place. The sheer volume of knives that were put in these bins, I saw one of them opened, like dozens and dozens of knives, like an arsenal coming out of this thing. And our streets are awash with them, and the more we can do to get rid of them, the better. So, of course, I agree that in the end someone can kill someone with a bread knife, but, you know, it is much better for children, for young people and people in gangs not to be carrying these things.
Of course, of course. But it's a cultural thing, because it's about there being a critical mass of people who feel that they need to carry them. That if that becomes the norm, that everyone has a knife, then people feel that they have to have a knife, and you know, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And when you're a child, you don't have a concept of that you don't have a concept of time that means that you can decide to carry a knife, do one movement with your hand, and your life and the life of an entire family is completely ruined forever. And so, you know, of course, you have to tackle the means through which this happens, but there's much deeper issues here that need to be addressed too. And the problem is, I think, that we write off these particular kinds of crimes, particularly when it's young boys stabbing other boys. You know, they might make a little headline, but nobody really pays much attention to it. But it is an enormous tragedy for everybody involved.
Yes, I'm only moving you on because there's a story I know you want to get to.
Yes.
Assisted dying on the agenda here, whether it's Esther Rantzen, Daily Express has got a campaign, I know. And this is the first woman to die in a nitrogen suicide pod in Switzerland. It's a Dutch-made device, and you have actually written in detail about this.
I have. I've reported on this for years. I've reported on the man behind it for about 10 years, and I went to see the unveiling of this suicide pod when it was first revealed to the public in 2019. And it's a device. I'm not going to go into how the device works, because it's not necessarily a good thing for people to know how the device works. But essentially, it is a device that promises people a painless death that they control, that's at a time of their choosing, without a doctor administering drugs. And they've chosen to pilot it in Switzerland because Switzerland has quite liberal laws about the right to die, although obviously the Swiss authorities think that this device is in contravention of those laws, and people have been arrested for using it. I mean, I think this device, which promises to be a solution to the problem of how to give people a peaceful death at the time of their choosing. I think it's not a solution of a problem, it's a symptom of a problem, because it shows that we just don't have the laws framed in such a way to give people that peace of mind.
And whenever we mention this, we mention the Samaritans as well, available 24 hours a day, joe@samaritans.org or 116 123. Breaking news, Sir Keir Starmer urges Britons to leave Lebanon. More on that coming up next here on Sky News.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win. Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.